Hi, boys and girls. We are going to do a lesson today that's called social studies. Can you guys say that? Social studies. So social studies is just learning about the world around you, okay? Learning about important people and places and things, and learning about history, things that happened in our past. I brought this big giant book home from school, and I've actually had it here for a while. And we didn't use it the first semester because it's just kind of hard to do at home. Those packets were a little difficult to do. But we have been doing social studies. So let me kind of just give you an idea what social studies is all about. Okay, here is the table of contents. This is telling us what's in our big giant social studies book. I am going to skip a lot of pages. Now, it just talks about how to be a good citizen. And we work on that every Friday when I choose someone to get the citizenship award, right? Somebody who follows rules, somebody who does a good job during Zoom, somebody who turns in all their work. Now, what these children are at a library, okay, at school, and they're asking the librarian about, maybe they're looking for a book about somebody important, a special person, and the librarian will help them find a book. Okay, so this shows people that we're going to learn about throughout the year. And you guys probably recognize him. This is Martin Luther King Jr., right? You're going to see a better picture in a minute. This is George Washington. This is Abraham Lincoln. Now, for now, that's all we're going to talk about. And so these are all people in the United States who have been good citizens or have done something important for our country. Now, the first page here is all about rules. And we spent a lot of time the first month of school, especially on Zoom, learning how to follow rules and be a good citizen, okay? I'll go ahead and read this. We follow rules each and every day. They help us work and help us play. They keep us safe. They help things run. Rules make sure we all have fun. But most important at home and school, always remember this simple rule. Be nice to others in all you do, and others in turn will be nice to you. And when you see the picture of these children, they're lined up so nice at the drinking fountain. They're not fighting, they're not pushing, they're not saying, hey, it's my turn, you're taking too long. They're just, the boys getting a drink, they're waiting nicely in line. The girls are talking very friendly and really nice, and they're making friends, right? They are definitely following rules. Now, I am going to skip quite a few pages here because our whole first chapter was just on being a good citizen, and I'm going to skip. We're going to go back to some of these. This was all about symbols and saying the flag salute, which we've done. Okay, now I need to go. Sorry about that. Here we go. I guess I have to turn this around. Famous people. We're going to talk about this lady another time, okay? I'm going to flip this book around. There, famous people in the United States of America in our history. People who made the United States a great place to live, okay? And these are important people that we want to learn about. You guys remember Martin Luther King Jr.? Remember in January there was Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and we read a couple of books about the things that he did. So I'm going to just go over it. It says Martin Luther King Jr. was born in 1929 and he died in 1968. He wanted all people to be treated fairly. Martin Luther King Jr. was born in Atlanta, Georgia. Dr. King was a minister and a civil rights leader. He gave speeches and led peaceful marches. Do you guys remember that? All the people marching to try to change the laws. Okay, this is Abraham Lincoln. He was born in 1809 and died in 1865. That was a really long time ago, wasn't it? He was known as Honest Abe. Abraham Lincoln was born in Hardin County, Kentucky. As a boy, Abraham Lincoln was not able to go to school very often, so he taught himself. He taught himself how to read. And in one of our books, we'll learn that he actually had a stepmother that taught him how to read. He was a famous president and helped keep our country together. Okay, I have a whole bunch of books about Abraham Lincoln that I brought home. I'll probably just be able to read a couple, but today this just is kind of an introduction on the presidents. Okay, George Washington was the first president of the United States. He was our country's first president. George Washington was born in Westmoreland County, Virginia. President Washington was a leader who worked hard to help build our new country. Our capital, Washington, D.C., is named for him. And boys and girls, I used to live in the state of Washington that was named after George Washington also. Okay, so we've got George Washington was our first president of the United States. Abraham Lincoln was our 16th president of the United States. Okay, I'm going to put our big giant book away for now. And I'm going to get out this book. Okay, it's called My First President's Day Book, and it just gives us a little story about George Washington and a little story about Abraham Lincoln. And we're going to start out with George Washington. Young George. What kind of boy was George Washington? He liked to swim and run, and catch a fish, and ride a horse, and read when the day was done. He made his brothers wooden swords and play at war for fun, and no one dreamed he'd fight someday as General Washington. So when he was a young boy, this is him playing with his friends, okay, and they would make swords out of wood, and they'd play army. They'd play fight, right? Now I know boys like to do that, and girls. Everybody likes to do that as long as it's pretend, right? Here he is. Now he is studying in a nice room with a desk. Boys and girls, have you ever seen one of these before? This is called an hourglass. If you notice on the wall, there are no clocks, right? So this was such a long time ago. They didn't have watches and clocks. This is how they told the time. Okay, so once all that sand goes down, I think that was probably an hour, right? And then they would flip it over and they would keep track of the time that way. And guess what he's using for a pen? It's a feather. Isn't that cool? He has a feather that he dips in the ink and he uses it to write and do his lessons. He wished to be a gentleman, the boy of long ago, and so he copied all the rules that gentlemen should know. Sit not when others stand, sleep not when others speak. He copied off 100 rules in less than half a week. He thought of other rules as well, like duty never shirk, and then he had a further task to put the rules to work. So even when he was a young boy, he was learning about how to become a gentleman and how to follow rules. Now here he is all grown up. Here's a picture of George Washington on his horse. Okay, this is where he lived, Mount Vernon. I like a farm, said Washington. Mount Vernon most of all. I like to ride my horse and watch the crops grow green and tall. And yet he left the place he loved to meet his country's call. So he was a general in the army, so he had to leave his home, and then he was in charge of the army. Here he is. There he is. He's on his horse. A tall man, a strong man, a man upon a horse. A gentleman in satin coat and powdered wig, of course. A three-cornered hat man with a uniform for war. General George Washington was all of that and more. Before he became president, he was the general in the army, and he wore this kind of a hat. It was called a three-cornered hat. 1, 2, 3. Guess what, you guys? We're going to make a three-cornered hat. We're going to do that in a couple of days. Okay, here he is, and he is, he's in charge of all these soldiers here. I might have to skip that one. Okay, I'm going to skip that one and go on to when he became president. Folks wanted him to be their king. The war with England won. He would not hear of such a thing. He said, my job is done. I have no wish for kingly fame. At home I'll be content. But with some urging, he became our first great president. So here he is, George Washington, okay, and he became the president of the United States. There he is, President George Washington, okay. High above the town it soars, 500 feet and more, made of marble, gleaming white, it shines through peace and war. A fitting way to honor one who filled the country's needs, a monument for Washington, so tall in thoughts and deeds. Now, I have been to Washington, D.C., boys and girls, and this is a very, very tall, it almost looks like a statue, but it's actually a building, very, very tall. This pool is called the Reflecting Pool. And you can go there. You can actually go up inside of that. You can go inside. I didn't get to do that because it was just at a time when it was closed. But it's beautiful, beautiful. Washington, D.C., where the White House is. Okay, now, you guys, I'm going to switch, and we're going to talk about Abraham Lincoln just a little bit, okay? Here's Abraham Lincoln. Here's the house that he grew up in. One-room cabin. A simple cabin made of logs was all the Lincolns had. One room, one window, and a door, a loft and earth that made a floor. When Abe was just a lad, and no one ever thought a humble home like that would house a future president who wore a stovepipe hat. So he grew up in a very small little cabin, okay? Just a very, very simple house. Hey, and look, he's crawling up to a loft where his bed is at Pigeon Creek. He had to sleep on a corn husk bed because he had no other. He had to walk a good long way for water for his mother. His hands grew hard from holding tight the axe's heavy handle. He had to read by fireplace light because he had no candle. So look at where he grew up. Kind of on a farm, but look at his house. Remember George Washington's house? Look at how fancy George Washington's house was, and look at how simple Abraham Lincoln's house was. A learning boy. Abe's father called him lazy. Abe's second mother said, lazy, just you wait and see. He has a learning head. Abe studied law and thought about events that came and went, and Mrs. Lincoln lived to see that learning boy grow up to be our 16th president. The reason his dad said he was lazy is that he always tried to get him to go out and work on the farm, and Abe just wanted to sit and read because he loved to learn. He didn't have a fancy desk like George Washington did. Remember George Washington's desk when he was a boy? See how fancy his desk was? He had the globe and the map on the wall. And look at Abraham Lincoln. He just had to sit on a little chair by the fire. Growing tall. Abe Lincoln was growing lad those years at Pigeon Creek. He kept outgrowing sleeves and socks, it seemed like every week. He grew as tall as 6'4", and it is good to tell that as he stretched out more and more, his mind grew tall as well. Remember they said he loved to learn. Who grew up poor as a barefoot lad and read a book every chance he had? Who studied law? Who stood up tall and spoke of liberty for all? Who wore a shawl and a tall top hat? Abraham Lincoln did all that. These are nice little poems, aren't they? So George Washington, remember he had the three-cornered hat? Abraham Lincoln had this kind of hat. Called it a stovepipe hat. It was a tall hat. Okay, here he is. He's delivering his famous speech. The day was cold, the setting bleak. The crowd around the speaker's stand watched Lincoln as he rose to speak, 2 sheets of paper in his hand. The North and South were still at war when Lincoln spoke with pride of men who fought at Gettysburg for freedom's cause and died. Our people must be one, he said. Some now are slaves, some are free. One nation under God, he said, is what we're meant to be. This is his famous speech called the Gettysburg Address. Now, I love this one because I have a little story to tell you. If you go to Washington, D.C., be sure to see the monument in Lincoln's memory. You'll see him sitting thinking with wisdom on his face and charity for everyone of every faith and race. So if you go to Washington, D.C., remember the Washington Monument? Okay. Oh, let's see. I'm so sorry. I know this has taken a long time. Where was that? Oh, here it is. Okay, so when I went to Washington, D.C., I got to see the Washington Monument, but there's also a building called the Lincoln Memorial, and it's like a big museum with everything in there all about Abraham Lincoln. Well, my favorite thing is look at the statue. It looks so real, but it's made out of stone. Look at how small the children look by that big giant statue. And that is the end. Now, I know that took a long time. The reason I like that book, it just tells a little bit about both presidents. Okay, what I want you guys to do now is get out that black folder. And I just have 2 fun things for you to do today, okay? Because I know that took a long time. I got 2 dot-to-dots. One is Abraham Lincoln and one is George Washington. You just have to connect the dots and then you can color them. I'll do it for you real quick because I'm trying to go fast here. But let me also show you, let's see, where are my pictures that I printed out today. Sorry about that, guys. Oh, I had them here. Here they are. Here's a good one, okay? I like that one. George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and connect these dots really fast. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So all I'm doing is going around his face. This is Abraham Lincoln. Now, when, just look back here. When you color it, he had, I would just say peach skin, maybe use a brown. He had black hair. You can color his suit. Now, George Washington, when we finish with him, he wore a wig, and the wig was white. So we'll leave his hair white. So George Washington, once we connect these dots, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So I do his face, connect the dots, and I'm going to color it. Give me 1 second because I actually have some that are already done. And I will put these pictures on the assignment page. Sorry about that, I forgot to get these out. Here we go. I will take a picture of these so you can see. This is my Abraham Lincoln all colored. And this is my George Washington all colored. Okay, we're just gonna do those 2 pages today. All right, bye-bye.